Kentucky looked like an Elite Eight or even Final Four team as recently as last week, but after that home loss to UNC-Wilmington, should we be pumping the brakes on the Cats?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part, of course, of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade. Today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that promo code Locked On College, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. We got a ton of great stuff to get to today. We'll talk about why the net rankings, they matter in March. They don't really matter in December. We'll talk about why that might be. We'll talk a little bit about some of the teams that our rankings were a little different than the AP poll, why that is. We also got to preview some fantastic games in the Jimmy V Classic coming up today. We're going to start with Kentucky, though. But before we get to that, Isaac, since we're talking about the net rankings today, I got a Trivia Tuesday question for you.
Well, baby, let's do it.
All right, here we go. This is the first time I've asked you a question, and I just re-updated it because it was probably way too hard, but we'll see how you do on this one. We'll get back to this question at the end of the show for those of you listening, if you want to try to think of the answer before we get to it. Who is the lowest net ranked team to get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament? Oof. I will tell you that it happened in 2019, to give a little bit of a hint there. Who is the team, and maybe even venture a guess at where they were ranked in the net to get that at-large bid, at least a range, some kind of range. We'll come back to this at the end of the show. Isaac, think about that one. See if you can pull off what would be a very good guess. If you,
I already know the answer, Andy. It's the Zion Williamson Duke team. Clearly, were very lowly ranked.
Yeah, they were like 75th at the net, right?
That team
we'll
was
back to that
insane,
one.
Man. What a wild team that was.
That team was absolutely nuts. Let's talk Kentucky, though.
Okay.
Because we got a Kentucky team that is, what are they, 6-2 on the season, I believe. They had a loss to Kansas, fantastic win over Miami, a couple other good quality wins, nothing super elite on that schedule up to this point so far in terms of
Kansas. You wouldn't call that win elite?
Which one?
Oh, no, they lost to Kansas.
I was going to say they lost to Kansas. They didn't beat that team. They got an elite win over Miami.
Honestly, I think Miami's going to be really good. I know the computers hate them, but the
computers do hate Miami. They really do.
Man.
But the issue with Kentucky is youth. I mean, honestly, the issue is youth. And I think like Kentucky, the offseason, for those who listen to the show throughout the offseason, there's so many ebbs and flows. We're really excited about Kentucky. Now we're really nervous about Kentucky. Now we're really excited about Kentucky. Like, it constantly kind of changed throughout the offseason. And honestly, that has continued into the season. Early season, there was some nervousness. Aaron Bradshaw's out. Again, Onyenso's out. Zvonimir Visic doesn't get that eligibility. He's out. And they have some close games earlier in the year to St. Joe's. Then they play really well against Kansas. And then they beat Miami. And we're kind of starting to feel like, okay, maybe this team, maybe Calipari's got to figure it out. They're running more. They're playing more at tempo, all this exciting stuff. The freshmen look fantastic. They have 3 legitimate NBA point guards on their roster, and Wagner, Shepard, and Dillingham. And then they go out and host UNC-Wilmington. And for the first time in UNC-Wilmington's history, they beat a ranked team on the road as the Cats fall at Rupp Arena 80-73. Isaac, I'm having a hard time making heads or tails of this Kentucky Wildcats program right now. Where are you at with this team?
Well, and I also want to remind us that there was the overtime game against St. Joe's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To factor into that as well. Andy, I think what you said is where I land with it. It is such a byproduct of the youth and also the missing all our 7-footers until Aaron Bradshaw is now back. But still, it was his first game back against UNC-Wilmington. What's interesting is looking at the stats for Kentucky. I'm actually encouraged by the fact that Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell are the 2 leading scorers right now. And so it's not this like, hey, we're going to lean wholeheartedly fully on these young guys. It's like, man, we're letting Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell still kind of win the day. But I think part of it is all this in and out. You know, you're without DJ Wagner, as you said right now. What I love about that is it's given Reed Sheppard a chance to just be a dude. Andy, that to me, the Reed Sheppard story is maybe my favorite storyline in all of college basketball early this season. But at the end of the day, there are 6 players averaging double-digit points right now for Kentucky: Antonio Reeves, Trey Mitchell, Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards. All 6 of those guys are averaging double-digit points. Now, some of that is with Wagner out. It gives other people, right, a chance to step up. But here's the thing. This is something we've often seen with Kentucky early in a season, is them trying to get things figured out with the youngins. But you see the talent. And when we've seen games where the talent is there, and then seen games where it's looked like freshmen, more often than not, barring catastrophic injury, Coach Cal has these guys rolling in February and March. And I, as of early December, think it's going to be that this year, particularly if we can get Onyenso in and going, and if Big Z is ready to go as well.
Yeah, Bradshaw makes his debut against UNC-Wilmington. Only plays 13 minutes, but it's nice to see him get on the floor. You got to imagine that as he gets more acclimated to, playing on that foot and certainly just adjusting to college basketball. I mean, not only has he not played a game yet, he missed a lot of valuable practice time with the team as well. So you got to, figure that the ramp up time might take him a little bit of time, but he's a really immense talent. And I think just knowing that he's back, knowing Onyenso is coming back. Obviously, the Avicic situation is pretty murky right now, but Onyenso is going to come back, barring a setback, and Bradshaw is already back. So I think there's plenty of optimism there. Wagner, I don't know. I don't have a super recent update, but it doesn't sound like he's expected to be out all of that long. And in this game, you could feel the absence of Wagner. We talked up Shepherd and Dillingham, and those guys are great, but they had 14 assists, the Wildcats in general had 14 assists and 13 turnovers in this game. Going into the game, they had the best assist to turnover ratio in the country as a team. Wow. And they go in 14 and 13 in this one. That's an issue. Shepherd and Dillingham had 9 assists combined, but they also had 7 turnovers. I think a big thing that's really impacting Kentucky and that will ultimately shape how the rest of the season goes is the development of Justin Edwards. We're talking about a guy who's expected to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. We're talking about a guy that many people had labeled as number 1 in what is an admittedly weak 2024 draft class. Edwards has not looked like that guy. I mean, he just hasn't. He's averaging 10.3 points per game, 4.4 rebounds. He's not distributing the ball. He's only averaging 1 assist. He's not putting up a bunch of big defensive numbers, and he's not shooting it all that well. 45.5% from the field, just under 26% from 3. I think he's under 65. He's around 65% from the free throw line too. And the dude's just not shooting the ball well.
68.4.
So under 70% from the free throw line, which is still not great.
No.
He's just not shooting the ball well. And you watched Kentucky's games, and you can see why the scouts are so enamored with him. You can see why he's still, even now, showing up in the lottery range on mock drafts, even though his performance hasn't been good, because the athleticism is there, the skill set is there, and he's not consistent. Freshmen take time. Some, even great freshmen, sometimes aren't great right away. And I think that there is reason for optimism that Edwards will figure it out. Kentucky rarely has guys who just completely bust. It does happen. No team is impervious to that. And when you recruit as many 5-star talents as Cal does, you're going to miss every once in a while. But I don't think Edwards is a miss by any stretch. Far from it. I just think he might not be, he's not quite ready to be that super impactful guy right away. Maybe by February, that's different. If that's the case, this team's ceiling gets a lot higher.
And against their 2 most elite opponents, he's had 2 very different games. Against Kansas, 29 minutes, but 0 for 6 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, 0 for 1 for 2 from the free throw line. But then against Miami, it was probably his most efficient game. Maybe most efficient? Yeah, like 5 of 7 from the field. You're looking at, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's the kind of efficiency you want. And I think you make such a good point about, we got to let freshmen grow up. We can't just assume that everyone is going to come in and drop 85 points a game right out of the gate. We have to let these young men, I know they're experienced, I know they're talented, I know they've been in elite situations already, but allow them to prosper, allow them to take the time necessary. And I know at a place like Kentucky or Kansas, Duke, Carolina, Villanova, Gonzaga, whatever it is, right? They're just going to be in a bigger spotlight. But I love your point, Andy. Let this young man grow up. And I'm very excited to see who he's going to be as we get to February and March. And as he does so, I think Kentucky's going to be in great shape.
Well, let me ask you this, Isaac, real quick. We have him 20th in our recent Locked On College Basketball Top 25 rankings. I still maintain that this is a perfectly capable Sweet 16 team, and I honestly still contend that this is a team that could make the Elite Eight. Are you still in agreement with that, or do you think that the ceiling is a little bit lower, having seen this game against Wilmington?
I think the Wilmington game is a product, as we've already said, of freshmen. I think it's a product of what happens in the course of a college basketball season. I'm not off of that at all. In fact, before this UNC-Wilmington game, I was moving into a direction of saying, is Kentucky now my favorite to win the SEC? And there's nothing in a one-off performance, even against a lower team like this, that takes me off of that. Now, if we start to see this as a consistent thing, we'll reevaluate. Right now, as a one-off, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. What about you, Andy?
Yep, I'm with that 100%. I think Kentucky's still they're right there with Tennessee in the top of the SEC. I think it's clearly going to be one of those two in my mind. I think A&M certainly in that conversation. You never know what's going to happen with Arkansas and Alabama. Those two teams could rebound, but I think it's between Kentucky and Tennessee. I think Kentucky's got a great chance, and if this team is healthy and cooking in March, I would not be surprised if Calipari can kind of exercise some demons from the last couple of years and get this team into the second.
Oh boy, he better, or he is going to be struggling.
Yeah, it's going to be rough.
Hey, people are ready to explode. Andy, these net rankings, they're going to matter in March as things normalize, but it's clear they're not to be taken as seriously in early December. We're going to tell you why on that in just a second. Right after we tell you about today's episode being brought to you by Game Time. Folks, the Jimmy V Classic is tonight inside the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. Perhaps you're realizing, I could have had a V8 and I could have gone to the Jimmy V Classic. You want to go, but you don't have tickets. Good news. You're in luck with Game Time, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Killer last minute deals, all in prices, pictures of the view from your seat, and their best price guarantee. With that, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your tickets. They've got you covered. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find your last minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Andy, the net rankings, the NCAA evaluation tool, that's what that acronym stands for, released for the first time this season on Monday morning, and now we'll get a daily refresh. So folks, as you're listening to this or watching it on Tuesday, you'll see Tuesday's refresh and any movement from what we're going to talk about right now. Want to remind us all as we get into this that the net rankings take time to level out. They take time to normalize. They take time for the data points that we get throughout the course of the season to make it make sense. Every year, there are going to be anomalies both up and down. And almost, Andy, I think it's fun just because it's so comical where teams kind of wind up. Let me just give us a few examples of some of the wackiness early. BYU having a great year, but they're second in the net. In fact, two Cougs, two new Big 12 members right at the top as Houston's number one. Princeton, all the way up to number 8. They're having a great year. I wouldn't call them 8th in the country. How about the fighting Larry Birds? Indiana State is 22nd right now. Andy McNeese, this one might be the most egregious to me, is 30th. That's 1 spot ahead of Gonzaga and 2 spots ahead of North Carolina. Duke, 37th. That Kentucky team we just talked about, they shouldn't be 45th, but that's where they're at. How about some with a massive discrepancy? UMass Lowell, 46th in the first edition of the net. They're 128th at Ken Palm. Andy, we could go up and down the board here. Let me drop all the way to the bottom. Wake Forest, 133. Indiana, 137. Arkansas, 117. St. Mary's, they're off to a terrible start, but they're 155th behind Gardner-Webb and just ahead of Bryant. LSU, all the way down at 165th. So, Andy, help bring some sanity to the circus that was Monday morning and lunchtime on Twitter.
Yeah, it's always funny to me the way that people respond to the net rankings when they first come out. It's always been something that I don't really get why people get up in arms about it, because it doesn't matter right now. Like, I mean, you could make an argument, well, the AP poll doesn't matter either. And yes, that's fair. That's fine. But the AP poll is voted on by people who are trying to determine who they think the best 25 teams are. And in some degree, it does matter. It's nice when you're playing games and on TV, you got that little number next to your name. You get more recognition on like sites like ESPN when you're searching by top 25. Teams care about this. They care about their top 25 streak. Like, the AP poll does matter in ways that aren't super serious, but it matters. Early season net rankings, I mean, they just don't matter at all. They really, truly do not mean anything. And I'm not trying to denigrate the system, although there are some certainly complaints that can be made about how much the net rankings impact how the NCAA tournament is seeded. And I think that that's maybe a conversation for another time as we get closer to that point. But early season net rankings just don't matter. It just doesn't matter. Anything that has Princeton showing up as a top 10 team in the country shouldn't be taken all that seriously. And that's not to disrespect Princeton, but they're not a top 10 team in the country. Indiana State's not a top 25 team. McNeese is not better than Gonzaga, North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky. They're not. And so it's just something where when people get up in arms about it, like, why is BYU so much higher than Gonzaga? Why is Princeton higher than Gonzaga? This is stuff I've seen in the Locked On Zags Discord channel. It's like, because it doesn't matter. It's gonna even out. It's gonna by the end of the year, if McNeese is still ahead of Gonzaga, either something very bad has happened to Gonzaga, something extraordinary has happened at McNeese, or there's something wrong with the computer system for the net rankings. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. When we get to February, mid-February, early March, if we're still seeing some wonkiness in the net rankings or things that don't seem right, and they're dramatically impacting how teams are seated, yeah, that's cause for concern and cause for Twitter vitriol and all that stuff. But right now, these rankings are so obviously based on a small amount of data points that it's just creating a really unique, weird, wonky situation that I think is fun to chuckle at, as we have done so far in this segment, but just not something that I think really merits a lot of consternation at all.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is that people, maybe, Andy, just don't realize it.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Because we're so conditioned to think about the AP poll and it being a results-based metric. I think that a lot of people's brains and just legitimately uninformed brains, not people, it's not people are dumb or stupid or ignorant. Well, I guess they are ignorant, because the definition of ignorance is you just don't know. Yeah. And I think that's where it's at, is it's like, well, why is the net voting on this way? I think that's it. And so it would be helpful for, like, folks, the NCAA, for example, has a great article that explains how the net is compiled. There are 4 different metrics that come together to make this up, a much more involved metric than was the RPI, which was an overly simplistic sort of thing. And so I think that's the bottom line, is take a breath, be patient, and just do some reading on what brings together the net, and then watch it normalize over the days and weeks and months ahead.
Isaac, I want to talk a little bit about our Locked On College Basketball Top 25 rankings as compared to the AP poll. We've been wanting to do this more times this year, and we haven't quite gotten a chance. For those who don't know, myself, Isaac, Leaf Tulane, our regular guest on Wednesday shows, the 3 of us all each do our own individual top 25 rankings. We aggregate them together into a Locked On College Basketball Top 25 rankings. We post it on our social media accounts every Monday morning, so you guys can check it out there if you want to see it. And I kind of want to talk, we had 2 teams in the top 25. We actually were very close to the AP poll this week. Typically, we have 4 or 5 teams that we're kind of different on, but this week we had North Carolina in the same spot, Creighton in the same spot, a handful of other teams we had right on exactly where they were in the AP poll, but 2 teams that we were 5 or more spots apart on. One of them is Clemson. The AP poll had Clemson at 24. We had them at 15. The other one being Texas. The AP poll has Texas at 12. We had Texas at 18. I'll let you start either of those 2 teams that you want to talk about why you think there's a spread there between our rankings and the AP rankings.
Sure. I'll go Clemson first. Let's just go in the order you had it. Clemson, I think it might be time, Andy.
Yeah.
To take Brad Brownell off the perpetual coaching hot seat. Because this Clemson team, to me, is very legit. They are experienced. PJ, if I was voting for ACC Player of the Year right now, it would most likely be between Clemson's PJ Hall, who was having a year, RJ Davis from North Carolina, Believe it or not, Quentin Post from Boston College is having a great. Those are the only three guys in the league averaging 20 or more points, and then Kyle Filipowski because you got it right. But legitimately, and PJ Hall would probably have my vote right now. That's how good he is playing, and you've got a three-headed group of returners. There are more returners, but just three in particular from Clemson that I love. When you think about Chase Hunter being back and some others, and then you get Joe Girard added to this.
Girard's a huge addition for this
right.
team.
Like I just think they've just got a really, really good squad there, and I mean they've beaten Alabama, they've beaten Pitt at Pitt over the weekend. We mentioned that on yesterday's show. Beaten Boise State, who we always think is a strong Mountain West team. UAB, Davidson. These aren't joke teams. Like they've played a good schedule, and so this 7-0, I think, has some legit merit to it when I think about Clemson. I mean, goodness gracious, they're up to 28th at KenPom right now. And Andy, as we think about what the ACC is, we talked about Duke yesterday. I mean, there's very legitimate reason to think that they could. We've already been talking about them as a top 4, top 5 KenPom or ACC team. No reason to think they couldn't compete for an actual ACC championship this year.
They got a couple of good games coming up. They got South Carolina on the 6th. They got TCU on the 9th, and they're going on the road to play Penny Hardaway and Memphis on the 16th. We should learn a lot more about this Tigers team after they play those 3 squads. And then kind of same situation with Texas. Texas needed a game winner to beat Louisville, which is part of the reason I was a little bit lower on them. They are 6-1 on the year. Their only losses to UConn. It was a relatively close game against an extremely good Huskies program. But for Texas, I think a lot of judgment will come after this upcoming game on the 6th against Marquette. They are at Marquette, the Shaka Smart battle. That should be a really, really fun game. KenPom is favoring Marquette right now by 8 points. If Marquette beats Texas, I think we might have a little bit more information on Texas. Certainly, if the flip side happens, if Texas wins, we'll probably have some real concern about Marquette because that'll be 2 losses in a row for them. And B, we'll have a lot more to know, kind of more information about Rodney Terry's team, Max Asmus, how this Longhorn squad is going to look as they get into conference play coming up here pretty soon.
We got to get Dylan DeSue back, man.
Yep, no doubt about it. Isaac, we got some incredible games coming up tonight. The Jimmy V Classic. It's going to give us a monster matchup. Speaking of that UConn team, speaking of the ACC, you got UConn and North Carolina. What a tremendous game. We're going to break that game down and a few other matchups on Tuesday to close out the show. After a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's critically important for the success of your business to have a pool of quality candidates to interview, and thankfully, LinkedIn Jobs makes it easier to find them. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire, which is why you can find that many quality candidates. It's so easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to go out and hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker and easier. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Isaac, a bunch of very, very good college basketball games on Tuesday that we want to preview here to close out the show. We got to start with the Jimmy V Classic, of course, UConn, North Carolina, but we want to start with the game going on first. Before that, both these games are going to be on ESPN. That first game is FAU against Illinois, 6:30 Eastern time, again on ESPN. Right now, FanDuel is favoring the Owls of Florida Atlantic by 2.5 points. I'm really excited about this matchup. We have Florida Atlantic 11th. We have Illinois 16th. I think AP has both those teams, I think 14th and 16th, very, very close together. And this is going to be a really great matchup, a great test for Illinois, who's also got a game at Tennessee later in the week, and a huge test for FAU. We've been kind of wondering, when is this FAU team going to face, some of the really legit competition. They faced some very good teams so far this year and secured victories. They've looked every bit the part of a team that deserves to be in that top 25 conversation. But Illinois is a fantastic team as well, and I'm really excited about this matchup.
Oh, dude, for sure. And I love that it's like multiple veteran players just getting out here to do work. You got Terrence Shannon leading the way for Illinois. He's sitting at like 20 points a game. Although, if I remember correctly, Andy, and when you start talking, I'll look back at it. I think he's the only player for Illinois averaging double-digit points right now, which is pretty wacky. But for FAU, man, like Vlad Golden is the leading scorer right now for this team. And I would not have guessed that preseason. I would have thought it would be Elijah Martin or John L. Davis, but I mean, they're right behind him. He's at 15-4, and then John L. and Elijah are both in the 13s, I think. And so, I mean, if you're Illinois, you got to kind of pick and choose your poison here, because you got all these different, again, veteran ways that FAU is going to come at you. And I think this matchup has a lot of good stuff to it that is going to be not just some appetizer game for UConn and UNC. Like, this is every bit as much an incredible college basketball game. So folks, like, eat your supper, get tuned into this. Don't wait to get settled in for the nightcap.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, but man, we got to talk about that nightcap too.
Sure.
Because that's gonna be an absolutely fantastic game. And right now, one of the big storylines heading into that contest, as we record here on Monday afternoon, is the health updates for some of UConn's star players. Stephon Castle is expected to be available. Quote from Danny Hurley. This was pulled by Adam Zagoria on social media. Castle will be available, quote, as long as he comes out of today into tomorrow feeling good, he'll be available with restrictions. So be interesting to see how much Castle does play against Carolina, if Danny Hurley's willing to push him, if they're going to kind of be conservative. They also have injuries. Cam Spencer's been dealing with that ankle injury. He tweaked that ankle on Friday. We talked about that on Monday's show. He's been limited the last couple of weeks, or a couple of days, excuse me. They're hoping he's going to be able to go in that one. Donovan Klingen's got some toe injuries. Alex Caravan's got a finger injury. All sorts of guys banged up for UConn right now. It sounds like Danny Hurley's kind of playing it by ear with those guys, hoping to see how they look heading into the game. He mentioned that it's a long season. I have a feeling he's not planning to fully bench any of those guys unless they really can't go, because you don't want to not be at full strength against Carolina. But will be a huge storyline amongst the many other storylines in this game. Will certainly be how the health of many of UConn's key players is.
Yeah, and let's be honest, how is Coach Hurley going to play this when you get into the heat of a game in MSG?
Yeah.
Two blue, really strong programs. And I think, we're probably to the point of
I'm calling UConn a blue blood.
I know. I started to say it and then I hesitated. And I'm like, no, I'm giving them that status.
Yeah.
And so really curious to see like the Donovan Klingen Armando Bacot matchup. Yeah. Really interested to see how Carolina guards Tristan Newton, who's a 6'5" guy. Both Elliot Cadeau and RJ Davis are shorter. Andy, let's make quick picks in both Jimmy V games. Who you got, FAU, Illinois?
Give me FAU. I think FAU is going to win this one. I think the balance scoring from the guards, from Martin and Davis, is enough, and Golden's a beast down low. I'm not sure Illinois has enough of a supporting cast, so give me FAU.
Yep, I've got FAU to win and cover. Massive game from Elijah Martin. What about the nightcap?
Yeah, give me UConn. UConn's so good. Carolina's playing great. I honestly think that I finally had them in my top 10, and they absolutely look like a top 10 team. But UConn is one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country from a talent perspective. I'm worried about them being banged up. I could see that being an upset situation, but I think UConn, I'm not going to pick them to cover. It's a 4.5 spread. I think it's going to be a 2 or 1 point game potentially between these two teams, but give me UConn in the end.
That's exactly what I was going with. UConn to win outright, but Carolina covers that 4.5 points. Way too big for a game of this magnitude. Andy, we got 2 Big East, Big 12 games we want to quickly look at. Villanova at K-State. This game, Wildcats. I can't say Wildcats. They're both Wildcats. Villanova Wildcats. Man, we're getting into our Go Wildcats, Andy. Here we go. Villanova favored by 1.5. Providence at 22 Oklahoma. Remember, these are our rankings. Also, this one is Oklahoma favored by 6.5. Both these games tip at 7 Eastern. The Wildcats square off on ESPN2, and then Providence and Oklahoma on ESPNU. Andy, anything stand out from either of these games?
I think it's going to be a fantastic couple of matchups. I'll just say quickly on Providence and Oklahoma. Those two teams are combined 14-1 on the season. Oklahoma is the one getting the accolades. They're the one in the top 25. Providence has a chance to pull off what would be a huge victory for them, a signature win for Coach Kim English. I think Oklahoma is probably going to win. That's who I'm picking, but don't count out Providence here.
Yeah, agreed. And then, boy, I know Kansas State's not been great, but I have a hard time going against them at home, especially with that roller coaster we've had out of Kyle Neptune's Villanova team. So give me the Kansas State version of the Wildcats in that one.
Isaac, before we close, got to get you back on that Trivia Tuesday question here. Again, the question, just for those who maybe forgot at the top of the show, what is the lowest net ranked team to get an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament? It happened in 2019. Isaac, any guesses on the team and or where they may have been ranked in the net?
Let me give you the range first, just because that is what I feel better about. I'm going to say like mid-70s.
That is an incredibly good guess. They were 73rd, this team was. You want to take a stab at who it was?
Rutgers.
No, it was St. John's. St. John's, the Johnnies in 2019 were 73rd in the net. I'll give you the top 5 here real quick before we close it out. Okay. 2019, St. John's was 73rd in the net. 2021, Wichita State, the Shockers, were 72nd in the net. That same year, 2021, Michigan State was 70th. Then again in 2019, the next two, a couple of weird years here.
Arizona State, was that one of them?
Yes, Arizona State, 63rd in the net in 2019. And then Minnesota, 61st in the net in 2021. Those are your lowest net ranked teams to get at-large bids in the NCAA tournament. We'll see if we get any wonkiness this year as well. But of course, if you're looking at the net rankings now, don't take them too seriously. We got a few more months until those things are going to start to matter.
Oh man, Andy, that's a good one. My second guess would have had it. I should have remembered that St. John's thing, because that was a whole situation. Folks, thanks so much for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch to get your college basketball content every day. Please, if you would, go join us in our Discord. The link is in the show notes. We have a great time chatting college basketball all the time over there. Please make sure to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and we'd love to hear your comments on all of today's conversation. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. As always, and even more so, go Wildcats. And until tomorrow, peace.